pulled his cargo hauler out of hyperspace with practiced ease, the familiar hum of the engines settling into a steady rhythm. The asteroid field of 442 stretched before him like a graveyard of floating rocks, each one potentially hiding valuable minerals or salvage. As an independent cargo pilot, had learned to spot opportunities where others saw only danger. His scanner chirped, detecting something unusual among the drifting stones. A ship's signature, faint but definitely artificial, adjusted his heading, curiosity overriding caution. In the 3 years since humanity had joined the galactic community, he'd learned that strange discoveries often led to profitable ventures. The wreckage came into view gradually. A sleek vessel, unlike anything in his identification database, had embedded itself into the side of a massive asteroid. The ship's hull bore scorch marks and holes that spoke of a fierce battle. His military training from his days as a Navy medic kicked in as he assessed the damage. Someone had wanted this ship destroyed very badly. "Well, looks like someone had a really bad day," muttered to himself, maneuvering his hauler closer. His ethical subroutines were already running calculations. Salvage rights in unclaimed space were clear, but if there were survivors, his duty as a former medic took precedence over profit. The ship's design was elegant yet predatory, with curves that suggested both speed and lethality. Had never seen its like in any of the galactic databases, though something about its configuration reminded him of the vessels he'd studied during his brief military service. They were warrior race that most species avoided, known for their incredible combat abilities and cold efficiency. Suited up and prepared his boarding kit. His cargo hauler, the Lucky Strike, might not look like much, but it carried medical supplies and emergency equipment that had saved lives before. As he approached the damaged vessel, his scanner detected a single, weak life sign deep within its hull. The airlock had been destroyed in whatever battle had brought down the ship. Cut through the twisted metal with his plasma torch, noting how thick and advanced the hull material was. This was definitely military grade, possibly even better than anything the human defense force possessed. Inside, the ship was a maze of darkened corridors and emergency lighting. The artificial gravity still functioned, but barely. Followed his scanner toward the life sign, passing through what appeared to be a sophisticated weapons locker. Empty racks suggested the ship had been carrying enough firepower to level a small city. "Hello," called out, his voice echoing through the empty halls. "This is of the cargo vessel Lucky Strike. I'm here to help if anyone needs medical assistance." No response came, but his scanner indicated the life sign was growing weaker. Quickened his pace, his medical bag bouncing against his hip. Whatever species was aboard this ship, they were dying, and his oath didn't distinguish between human and alien life. He found her in what appeared to be the ship's medical bay, though the equipment was unlike anything he'd ever seen. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with pale blue skin marked by intricate silver tattoos that seemed to pulse with their own light. Her build was lean but obviously powerful, with muscle definition that spoke of a lifetime of physical conditioning. Most striking were her injuries. Plasma burns covered her torso, and a piece of shrapnel protruded from her left shoulder. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, clearly in shock. Despite her alien appearance, recognized the signs of someone fighting for their life. "Okay, I've got you," said softly, setting down his medical kit. He began his assessment, noting the similarities and differences between her physiology and human anatomy. Her blood was deep purple rather than red, but it was definitely blood, and she was losing too much of it. As work to stabilize her wounds, he noticed details that sent chills down his spine. The silver tattoos weren't decorative. They were tactical markings, the kind used by elite soldiers to track kills and missions. Her hands, now pale and unconscious, bore calluses consistent with a lifetime of weapons training. This wasn't just any alien, this was a warrior. The medical scanner in his kit, designed for multi-species compatibility, finally identified her. The readout made pause in his work. Female, approximately 30 standard years old, blood type compatible with human O-negative for emergency transfusion. But it was the additional data that made him swallow hard. Genetic markers indicated she was from the Vex bloodline, one of the most feared warrior families in the galaxy. If the database was correct, he was looking at someone whose people were legendary for their combat prowess and ruthless efficiency. They were known to be honorable but absolutely lethal when crossed. Hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. His rational mind reminded him that getting involved with warriors was a good way to end up dead. His military training whispered warnings about alien combat capabilities and the dangers of unknown political situations. Then his medical oath kicked in and got back to work. He applied pressure bandages to the worst bleeding, administered a broad-spectrum antibiotic that his scanner indicated would work with her physiology, and carefully removed the shrapnel from her shoulder. The piece of metal was clearly from her own ship, suggesting internal explosion or catastrophic system failure. The woman stirred as worked on her shoulder wound, her eyes flickering open. They were the color of liquid mercury, with pupils that contracted to slits in the medical bay's lighting. For a moment, those silver eyes focused on with an intensity that made him very aware of how alone they were on this drifting wreck. "Easy," said in his medic voice. "You're badly injured, but you're going to be okay. I'm human, my name is. I found your ship crashed into this asteroid and came to help." She tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound that might have been words in her native language. Continued working, applying synthetic skin to close the plasma burns. His supplies were limited, but they seemed to be having the desired effect. Her breathing was becoming more regular, and the dangerous pallor was fading from her blue skin. "I'm going to move you to my ship," explained, keeping his voice steady and professional. "My medical bay is better equipped, and I can get you to a proper medical facility. Don't try to move too much, you've lost a lot of blood." Those mercury eyes tracked his every movement, and could almost see her details about him, his equipment, and her surroundings. Even severely injured, she maintained the alertness of a trained warrior. It was both impressive and slightly unnerving. Rigged a stretcher from his emergency supplies and carefully moved her through the damaged corridors to his ship. The Lucky Strike's medical bay was small but well-equipped, a necessity for someone who often worked in dangerous, isolated areas of space. He transferred her to the medical bed and hooked her up to his monitoring systems. As the automated medical systems took over her immediate care, finally allowed himself to process what he'd just done. He'd rescued a warrior from certain death, someone whose people were known for their military might and complex honor codes. In human space, tales of warriors were told in hushed tones, stories of beings who could fight entire squads single-handedly and never showed mercy to their enemies. Yet lying unconscious on his medical bed, she looked smaller somehow. Still dangerous, certainly, but also vulnerable in a way that reminded him why he'd become a medic in the first place. Everyone deserved a chance to live, regardless of their species or reputation. Programmed a course for the nearest neutral trading station, a place called Haven's Rest that was known for asking few questions about its patients. As his ship pulled away from the asteroid field, he took one last look at the destroyed vessel. Whatever had happened there, it had been violent and decisive. Someone had wanted her dead very badly. In the medical bay, his patient's vital signs were stabilizing. The silver tattoos on her skin had stopped pulsing and now seemed to glow with a faint, steady light. Made notes in his log about her condition and the treatment he'd provided. Standard procedure called for reporting the rescue of any alien nationals to the proper authorities, but something held him back. Maybe it was the way those mercury eyes had looked at him, as if she was trying to figure out why he was helping her. Maybe it was his instinct that getting galactic authorities involved would only make things worse for both of them. Or maybe it was simply that his time in the Navy had taught him when to follow regulations and when to follow his conscience. Settled into his pilot's chair and watched the stars stream by as they traveled toward Haven's Rest. Behind him, the galaxy's most dangerous woman slept peacefully, her life saved by a simple act of human compassion. He had no idea that this moment would change everything, not just for him, but for the way the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The course to Haven's Rest would take 18 hours. Set the autopilot and returned to check on his patient. Her breathing was steady now, and the color had returned to her skin. As he adjusted her IV drip, those mercury eyes opened again, this time fully alert and focused. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the species divide. Saw intelligence there, and perhaps something else he couldn't quite identify. Confusion, maybe, or the first stirrings of curiosity about the strange human who had risked everything to save a complete stranger. "Rest," said softly. "You're safe now." The woman continued to study him for several more seconds before her eyes slowly closed, but could tell she wasn't really sleeping. She was thinking, processing, trying to understand what had happened and why. In saving her life, he had set in motion events that would ripple across the galaxy, though he couldn't know that yet. All knew was that he'd done the right thing, the human thing. Sometimes, that woke to the sound of his ship's proximity alarms. He dozed off in the pilot's chair while monitoring their approach to Haven's Rest, but something had triggered the automated systems. He quickly checked the scanner, expecting to see the trading station ahead of them. Instead, 3 ships were converging on their position, moving fast and with obvious hostile intent. Felt his stomach drop as he recognized the configuration of the vessels. Raiders, some of the most vicious pirates in this sector of space. They were known for taking prisoners only when they could be sold for profit and killing everyone else. "This is not good," muttered, running calculations on his navigation computer. The Lucky Strike was fast for a cargo hauler, but she wasn't built for combat. The raiders would overtake them in minutes, and his ship's defensive systems were minimal at best. A communications signal crackled through the speakers, speaking in heavily accented standard Galactic. "Human vessel, prepare to be boarded. Surrender now and your death will be quick." Was about to respond when a hand fell on his shoulder. He spun around to find his patient standing behind him, fully alert and moving with the fluid grace of a predator despite her recent injuries. The silver tattoos on her skin were pulsing again, this time with an angry red light. "How long?" she asked in perfect, though accented, standard Galactic. Her voice was deeper than had expected, with a musical quality that somehow made it more intimidating rather than less. "How long what?" asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Up close, she was even more impressive than he'd realized. The woman stood nearly a foot taller than him, and despite her recent injuries, she radiated a sense of barely contained power. "How long until they reach us?" she clarified, her mercury eyes fixed on the scanner display. "And what weapons does this ship carry?" "Check the display. Maybe 4 minutes, and we've got a single pulse cannon mainly for asteroid mining, nothing that could stop 3 raider ships." Something that might have been a smile crossed her features, though on a face it looked more like a predator showing its teeth. "What is your name, human?" He replied, "And you are?" "Vex," she said simply, as if that should mean something to him. When didn't react with obvious terror, she tilted her head slightly. "You truly do not know who I am." "Should I?" asked, though he was beginning to get a sinking feeling. The Vex bloodline was mentioned in his medical scanner's database, but he hadn't had time to research the details. "I am the one they send when death is required," said matter-of-factly. "I have killed over 300 beings in personal combat, destroyed 7 warships, and caused 3 governments to fall. The raiders know this. They are not here for random piracy." Felt his mouth go dry. He'd saved the life of one of the galaxy's most dangerous killers. "So they're here for you?" "Yes," confirmed, "and now they will kill you as well simply for helping me." She paused, studying his face. "This troubles you?" "Well, yeah," said. "I mean dying troubles most people." "No," said, her voice taking on a curious tone. "You are troubled that I will be responsible for your death. Why do you care about my feelings regarding your demise?" Looked at her in surprise. "Because you're a person, your feelings matter." Stared at him for a long moment, as if he'd said something in an alien language she was struggling to translate. "I have never encountered such reasoning before." The proximity alarms grew more urgent as the raider ships closed distance. Turned back to his controls, trying to figure out some way to escape that didn't involve becoming space debris. "Can you fight with those injuries?" "I can fight," replied simply, "but not 3 ships with a mining laser." "Then what do you suggest?" asked. Moved to his weapons console, her fingers dancing over controls with obvious familiarity. "You saved my life when you had no obligation to do so. You showed me kindness when I was helpless. In my culture, this creates a debt that must be repaid." "Look, you don't owe me anything," began, but cut him off with a gesture. "Honor is not optional," she said firmly, "but I may be able to repay my debt and ensure our survival." She turned to face him fully. "Do you trust me?" Looked into those mercury eyes and saw something he hadn't expected, uncertainty. For all her reputation and deadly skills, seemed genuinely concerned about his opinion of her. It was such a human trait that it caught him off guard. "Yeah," said, "I trust you." Nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed both surprise and respect. "Then listen carefully. I am going to transmit my identification to the raider ships. When they realize who they are attacking, they will hesitate. In that moment of uncertainty, you must execute a micro-jump directly into the asteroid field we left behind. That's suicide, protested. The navigation computers can't calculate safe paths through that debris field fast enough. But you can, said with absolute certainty. Humans have a gift for improvisation that other species lack. Your people see patterns where others see chaos. Trust yourself as I trust you. Before could object, activated the communication system and transmitted a complex series of codes. The effect on the raider ships was immediate. They reduced speed and began transmitting urgent messages to each other in their native language. They are afraid, observed with satisfaction. But fear will not hold them long. They have contracts to fulfill and reputations to maintain. Could see the lead raider ship accelerating again, apparently having overcome their initial shock. It's now or never. He plotted the micro-jump into the asteroid field, knowing it was probably the last thing he'd ever do. The navigation computer immediately began screaming warnings about collision probabilities and safe exit vectors, ignored them all and focused on the pattern of moving rocks ahead of them. As his finger hovered over the jump control, placed her hand over his. In my culture, we have a saying, honor shared is courage doubled. Thank you for sharing your honor with me. Hit the jump control, and reality twisted around them. The lucky strike materialized in the middle of the asteroid field, exactly where had intended. Massive rocks tumbled past them on all sides, any one of which could have crushed their ship if the timing had been off by microseconds. Immediately engaged manual control, flying by instinct and reflexes he developed during his military service. Behind them, the raider ships attempted to follow, but their larger vessels and automated navigation systems couldn't adapt quickly enough to the chaotic environment. Watched on his rear scanner as one ship clipped an asteroid and spun out of control. The other two were forced to back off, unable to risk their vessels in pursuit. Incredible, murmured, watching pilot through the obstacle course with precision that bordered on artistic. Your species' reputation for adaptability is well-founded. Was too focused on flying to respond, threading the needle between tumbling rocks that moved in unpredictable patterns. His hands moved over the controls with automatic precision, while his mind calculated trajectories and possibilities at superhuman speed. It wasn't superhuman, exactly. It was uniquely human, the gift of pattern recognition and creative problem-solving that had allowed his species to survive and thrive in hostile environments. When they finally cleared the asteroid field and jumped to safety, slumped in his chair, adrenaline leaving him shaky and exhausted. They'd escaped, but barely. How did you know I could do that? Asked. Moved to the scanner station, checking to ensure they weren't being followed. I have studied human combat records since your species joined the galactic community. You do things that should be impossible, find solutions where others see only problems. Your military forces defeat superior numbers through tactics that logic says cannot work. And you've been watching us that closely, why? Hesitated the first time had seen her show uncertainty. Because humans are different. In all my years as a warrior, I have never encountered a species that combines such capacity for violence with such dedication to mercy. It is a contradiction that intrigues me. Looked at her thoughtfully. Is that why you were really curious about why I saved you? Perhaps, admitted. No one has ever helped me without expecting something in return. No one has ever shown me kindness simply because I needed it. This is not behavior I understand. Maybe that's because you've been hanging around the wrong kind of people, suggested. His expression shifted, and for a moment she looked almost vulnerable. I have been what my people required me to be, what the galaxy needed me to be. I am very good at killing, I am very bad at other things. Such as trust, friendship, mercy, she paused, hope. Studied her face, seeing past the fearsome reputation to the person underneath. Well, you've got time to learn. Thanks to you, we're both still alive. Thanks to us both, corrected. Your courage and my knowledge, perhaps there is value in such partnerships. As the lucky strike continued toward Haven's Rest, found himself wondering if he'd stumbled into something much larger than a simple rescue mission. The way looked at him suggested she was thinking the same thing. They'd worked together to survive, and in doing so, had discovered something neither of them had expected to find. Maybe the galaxy's deadliest woman was about to learn that there was more to existence than endless conflict. And maybe a simple human cargo pilot was about to discover that even the most feared warriors were still people underneath, capable of growth and change. The stars stretched ahead of them, full of infinite possibilities. Haven's Rest was exactly what its name suggested, a place where travelers could find sanctuary without answering uncomfortable questions. The massive space station hung in the void between star systems, technically neutral territory where pirates, merchants, refugees, and mercenaries could conduct business without interference from any government. Guided the Lucky Strike toward the docking bays, nodding the eclectic mix of vessels around them. Everything from sleek diplomatic cruisers to battered mining ships shared space in the station's embrace. It was the kind of place where a human cargo pilot and a warrior could blend into the background. "I must warn you," said as they approached the docking ring. "My presence here may cause complications. Many beings have reasons to want me dead." "How many are we talking about?" asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Considered for a moment, perhaps half the station's population. Paused in his docking preparations. "Half. The other half either work for people who want me dead, or are smart enough to avoid me entirely," clarified helpfully. "Great," muttered, "and I thought the raiders were bad." As they settled into their assigned bay, noticed several other ships immediately powering up their engines and requesting emergency departure clearance. Word of their arrival was spreading fast through the station's communication networks. "Perhaps I should remain on the ship," suggested, nodding the exodus of vessels around them. "No way," replied firmly. "You need proper medical attention and I need supplies. We'll face whatever comes together." Tilted her head, studying him with those mercury eyes. "You continue to surprise me. Most beings would distance themselves from me to avoid association with my reputation." "Most beings didn't save your life," pointed out. "Besides, running away never solved anything." They made their way through the station's crowded corridors and quickly understood why so many ships had left. The usual bustle of Haven's Rest had quieted to an almost funeral hush. Conversations stopped as they passed and could feel dozens of eyes tracking their movement. The medical center was located in the station's inner ring, a modern facility that catered to dozens of different species. Doctor, an elderly physician, greeted them with professional courtesy tinged with obvious nervousness. "Ms. Vex," the doctor said, his blue-scaled hands trembling slightly, "I had heard rumors of your death." "Greatly exaggerated," replied dryly. "Doctor, I require a complete medical evaluation and treatment for plasma burns and trauma injuries." While Doctor began his examination, waited in the reception area and tried to ignore the stares from other patients. A young trader approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me," the trader said in broken standard Galactic, "but are you the human who travels with the Death of Worlds?" "The what now?" asked. "Vex," the trader explained. "She is called Death of Worlds. She once destroyed an entire hegemony battle fleet single-handedly. How are you still alive?" "I asked nicely," suggested. The trader stared at him in confusion and quickly retreated. Similar conversations followed throughout the afternoon as word spread that a human was somehow partnered with the galaxy's most feared bounty hunter. Began to understand the scope of his reputation. She wasn't just dangerous. She was a living legend, the subject of stories told across the galaxy to frighten children and military cadets. When emerged from the medical center, she seemed satisfied with her treatment. "Doctor confirms that your initial medical care was excellent," she informed. "You may have missed your calling as a healer." "I'll stick to cargo hauling," replied. "It's usually safer." They made their way to the supply depot, where needed to replenish his ship's provisions. The depot's manager, a nervous named, practically fell over himself accommodating their requests. "Anything you need, anything at all," assured them, his chitinous carapace clicking with anxiety. "Premium rations, medical supplies, ammunition, weapons modifications." "Just standard cargo supplies," said. "Food, water, fuel cells." "You don't want weapons?" asked in surprise. "Everyone who travels with her wants weapons." "I don't travel with her," corrected. "We're just traveling in the same direction." Raised an eyebrow at this distinction but said nothing. As gathered their supplies, she moved closer to. "You refuse to acknowledge our partnership," she observed. "Are you ashamed to be associated with me?" Looked at her in surprise. "No, not ashamed. I just don't want people to think you're my bodyguard or something. You're a person, not a weapon." "I am both," said simply. "It is what I was trained to be." "Maybe," acknowledged, "but that doesn't mean it's all you are." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of three figures in the depot's main entrance. Didn't recognize them, but the effect on the other customers was immediate. The area cleared as beings fled in obvious terror. The newcomers were mercenaries, a species known for their brutality and their enhanced cybernetic implants. The leader, a massive brute with more machine parts than original biology, approached their position with obvious hostile intent. "Vex," the leader rumbled through a voice synthesizer. "I am Prime. You killed my brother on station. I claim the right of blood vengeance." Stepped forward, placing herself between and the mercenaries. "Secondary challenged me to honorable combat and lost. There is no dishonor in his death." "You killed him for money," Prime snarled. "You had no personal quarrel with him." "He was hired to kill civilians," replied coldly. "Children were among his targets. I stopped him." "Irrelevant." Prime activated a massive energy weapon built into his cybernetic arm. "You will face me now, or I will kill your human companion first and make you watch." Stepped forward before could respond. "Wait a minute." All three mercenaries turned their attention to him, apparently surprised that the human would dare to speak. Could feel tension beside him, ready to fight despite the odds. "Your brother took a contract to kill children," said, his voice carrying the authority he'd learned during his military service. "Stopped him. That makes her a hero, not a villain." Prime laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans know nothing of honor. You would not understand." "I understand plenty," replied firmly. "I understand that anyone who targets children is a coward. I understand that someone who stops them deserves respect, not vengeance. And I understand that if you want to hurt my friend, you'll have to go through me first." The mercenaries stared at him in disbelief. Behind made a sound that might have been surprise. "You would fight us?" Prime asked. "You are unarmed and untrained." "I'm trained enough," said, "and I don't need weapons to stop bullies like you." Said quietly, "These are enhanced warriors. You cannot possibly." "Watch me," interrupted. He grabbed a container of pressurized coolant from supply rack and threw it directly at the nearest mercenary's cybernetic chest unit. The container ruptured on impact, instantly freezing the warrior's enhanced armor and causing system malfunctions throughout his implants. While the first mercenary stumbled and clawed at his malfunctioning equipment, rolled behind a cargo container and emerged with an industrial plasma cutter. He activated it and swung at the second mercenary's weapon arm, severing the cybernetic limb at the shoulder joint. Prime raised his arm cannon to fire but was already moving. He kicked over a stack of fuel cells, sending them rolling across the floor. When Prime stepped on one, shot it with the plasma cutter. The explosion sent the mercenary leader flying across the depot, his cybernetic systems sparked and smoking. Stood over him, the plasma cutter still humming with dangerous energy. "Your brother was a child killer," said quietly. "Did the galaxy a favor by stopping him. If you have any real honor, you'll thank her instead of seeking revenge." Prime struggled to his feet, his enhanced systems failing one by one. This is not possible. You are just human." "Yeah," agreed, "just human and proud of it." The three mercenaries limped away, their enhanced bodies no match for simple human ingenuity and determination. The depot's other customers slowly emerged from hiding, staring at with a mixture of awe and confusion. "That was incredible," whispered. "I've never seen anyone defeat enhanced with improvised weapons." Set down the plasma cutter and turned to find staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You protected me," she said slowly. "You risked your life to defend my honor." "Of course I did," replied. "You're my friend." "Friend," repeated as if testing the word. "I have never had a friend before." "Well, you do now," said simply. As they finished their supply run and returned to the Lucky Strike, noticed that demeanor had changed subtly. She walked differently, carried herself with less rigid formality. It was as if some internal barrier had finally begun to crack. She said as they prepared to leave Haven's Rest, "I must ask you something." "Shoot. When you fought those mercenaries, you could have simply left me to face them alone. Why did you risk yourself for someone like me?" Considered the question seriously. Because everyone deserves to have someone stand up for them. Everyone deserves to have someone believe in them, even the galaxy's deadliest woman. Was quiet for a long moment. I am beginning to understand why humans are considered such an unusual species. Oh, we're just getting started, said with a grin. Wait until you see what we can really do when we put our minds to it. As the Lucky Strike departed Haven's Rest, caught smiling, 3 days after leaving Haven's Rest, and found themselves approaching Nexus Prime, one of the galaxy's largest trade and diplomatic stations. Had cargo contracts to fulfill, and they both needed to resupply before continuing their journey. What neither of them expected was the reception waiting for them. Lucky Strike, this is Nexus Prime Traffic Control, came the voice over their communication system. You are ordered to proceed to Quarantine Bay 7 and submit to immediate inspection. Frowned at his console. Quarantine? We haven't been to any restricted worlds. Moved to the scanner station, her expression growing serious as she studied the readouts. We are surrounded by 12 patrol ships. This is not a routine inspection. Lucky Strike, the traffic controller continued. You are carrying a Class A security threat. Comply immediately or face hostile action. They're talking about me, said matter-of-factly. My presence here violates several treaties. I should surrender myself to avoid conflict. Not happening, replied firmly, opening the communication channel. Nexus Control, this is of the Lucky Strike. I'm carrying no contraband and pose no threat to station security. Request normal docking procedures. Negative, Lucky Strike. Vex is a known terrorist and assassin. You will surrender her immediately. Felt his temper flare. Terrorist? She saved my life and helped me escape pirates. The only crime here is how you're treating her. There was a pause before the controller responded. Mister, you may not be aware of Ms. Vex's history. She has killed hundreds of beings and destabilized multiple governments. For your own safety, you must distance yourself from her. I know exactly who she is, said. And I'm telling you that she's traveling with me voluntarily. We're not looking for trouble. Placed her hand on his shoulder. I appreciate your loyalty, but perhaps it would be better. No, interrupted. I'm tired of people judging you based on stories and reputation instead of who you actually are. He activated the ship-wide communication system so his words would be broadcast to the entire station. Nexus Control, and anyone else listening, let me tell you about the real Vex. What are you doing? Asked, her mercury eyes wide with surprise. Something that should have been done a long time ago, replied. He keyed the microphone. 3 days ago, this woman was dying in a crashed ship. I didn't know who she was when I saved her life. I just knew someone needed help. That's what humans do. He could see more ships moving to intercept positions around them, but continued. When pirates attacked us, she could have escaped in my life pod and left me to die. Instead, she stayed and fought beside me. When mercenaries tried to kill her for doing the right thing, she was prepared to face them alone rather than let me get hurt. Mister, the controller tried to interrupt. You don't understand. No, you don't understand, shot back. Yes, Vex has killed people, but every single target was someone who deserved it. Slave traders, child killers, war criminals. She's not a terrorist. She's a force for justice in a galaxy that too often ignores justice. Stared at him in amazement. No one has ever. I'm not finished, said both to her and to the listening stations. You want to know what I've learned about Vex? She's never broken her word. She's never targeted innocents. She fights for those who can't fight for themselves. And most importantly, she's capable of growth and change. The communication channel crackled with multiple voices as the station's authorities discussed their options. Could hear heated arguments in the background. Furthermore, continued, I'm formally requesting refugee status for Vex under the Human Accords. She's seeking to leave her old life behind and start fresh. That's a basic right that every sentient being should have. The Human Accords don't apply to alien nationals, came a new voice, apparently from someone with more authority. Actually, they do, replied. Section 7, subsection 4 clearly states that any being seeking protection from persecution can claim sanctuary with human representatives. I'm a licensed human merchant captain, which makes me an official representative of Earth in neutral space. There was a longer pause. Could imagine the frantic legal consultations taking place across the station. The Human Accords were relatively new, but they carried significant diplomatic weight in the galactic community. Mister, the new voice said finally, Even if your legal interpretation is correct, Ms. Vex still poses a security threat to this station. Only to those who deserve it, replied. And I guarantee her good behavior. She's under my protection and I'm under hers. We're partners. Beside him made a sound that might have been laughter. Partners, she repeated softly. I like that better than traveling in the same direction. The standoff continued for several minutes. Could see the patrol ships maintaining their positions, but none of them were powering weapons. That was a good sign. They were at least willing to talk rather than shoot. Finally, a new voice came over the communication system, this one belonging to someone recognized from news broadcasts. Admiral, the commander of Nexus Prime's security forces. Mr. I am Admiral. I've reviewed your request and Ms. Vex's record. While her past actions are concerning, I'm willing to grant you both temporary sanctuary while we sort this out. Thank you, Admiral, replied. We won't cause any problems. See that you don't, warned. You'll be restricted to commercial sections of the station, and Ms. Vex will be under constant surveillance. Any sign of trouble and this arrangement ends immediately. Understood, agreed. As the patrol ships escorted them to a docking bay, turned to face him fully. Why? She asked simply. Why what? Why did you risk diplomatic incident, possible imprisonment, even death, to defend me to strangers? Considered the question. Because what they were doing was wrong. They were treating you like a monster instead of a person. Someone needed to speak up for you. But the risk was worth it, finished firmly. You're one of the most honorable people I've ever met. Yes, you've done things that others consider terrible, but you did them for the right reasons. That matters. Was quiet for a long moment. In my culture, when someone defends your honor at risk to themselves, it creates a bond deeper than friendship. It creates family. Family, repeated thoughtfully. I like the sound of that. They docked at Nexus Prime without further incident, though noticed the heavy security presence around their bay. As they prepared to disembark, stopped him with a hand on his arm. I need you to know something. Since we met, I have been changing. The way you see me, the way you treat me, it makes me want to be better than I was. You were already better, replied. You just needed someone to notice. They made their way into the station's commercial district, followed discreetly by security teams. Conducted his business efficiently, noting how other traders and merchants gave them a wide berth. Some stared in obvious fear, others in curiosity, but all kept their distance. At a supply depot, they encountered a group of young beings from various species who approached them with obvious nervousness. The leader, a female barely out of adolescence, stepped forward hesitantly. Excuse me, she said are you really the Death of Worlds? Started to intervene, but raised a hand to stop him. She knelt down to bring herself closer to the young woman's level, her expression gentle. I am Vex, she said simply, and you are. The young replied, we heard what the humans said about you. Is it true? Do you really only kill bad people? Glanced at who nodded encouragingly. Yes, she told. I have only ever harmed those who chose to harm innocents. It is a code I have never broken. My sister was killed by slavers, said quietly. Security forces said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue them. They're still out there. Saw something shift in expression, a familiar hardness that spoke of old purpose. But when she spoke, her voice remained gentle. Justice delayed is not always justice, said carefully. Sometimes it simply takes time to find the right path. The young beings asked a few more questions before their guardians called them away. As they left, noticed that they looked at with something approaching hope rather than fear. Interesting, Admiral said, appearing beside them as if from nowhere. In 30 years of security work, I've never seen anyone get that kind of reaction to Vex. Maybe because you've never seen the real Vex, suggested. Studied them both thoughtfully. Perhaps not. Mister, your legal argument was quite clever. Did you know that subsection beforehand? I studied the human accords thoroughly before accepting my merchant license, replied honestly. We believe everyone deserves a second chance. Even galaxy-class killers. Especially them, said firmly. They're the ones who need it most. Nodded slowly. Very human philosophy, very optimistic. It served us well so far. That evening in their temporary quarters, sat by the viewport watching ships come and go from the massive station. Found her there, clearly deep in thought. Regrets, he asked. Questions, replied. For most of my life, I believed that strength meant standing alone, that trust was weakness, that mercy was failure. You have shown me that all of these beliefs were wrong. Not wrong, corrected gently. Just incomplete. Strength can mean standing together, trust can be power, mercy can be the strongest choice of all. Turned to look at him. What am I becoming? Someone new, replied. Someone better, someone who gets to choose who she wants to be instead of having it chosen for her. And if I choose to leave my old life completely behind, to find a new purpose. Smiled, then we'll figure out what that looks like together. That's what partners do. For the first time since he'd known her, smiled back, not the predatory expression of a warrior, but the genuine warmth of someone who had finally found hope. Outside their viewport, the galaxy stretched in all directions, full of possibilities neither of them had imagined when their journey began. Actually smiling as she watched the stars wheel past. Maybe, just maybe, we 6 months after their first meeting, stood on the observation deck of the Redemption, watching as their ship approached the asteroid field where their story had begun. Beside him studied a data tablet displaying information about their current mission. 15 missing ships in this sector over the past 3 months, she said, her voice carrying the professional tone she used during mission briefings. All cargo vessels, all carrying humanitarian supplies to refugee colonies. Same MO as the raids we stopped last week, observed. Someone's targeting relief efforts systematically. Their ship was no longer the simple cargo hauler Lucky Strike. After word spread about their partnership, the Galactic Humanitarian Council had commissioned them to investigate and stop attacks on relief convoys. The Redemption was purpose-built for their unique combination of skills, fast, well-armed, and equipped with the latest scanning technology. More importantly, it carried a crew of volunteers from across the galaxy, beings who had been inspired by their story to join what had become known as the Redemption Fleet. Former pirates, discharged soldiers, refugees seeking purpose, all united by the belief that everyone deserved a second chance. "Captain," came a voice over the intercom. "This is Chief Engineer. We're detecting a distress signal from Sector 7. Smiled at hearing the familiar voice. The nervous from Haven's Rest had been their first volunteer, determined to do his part in their mission. His engineering skills had proven invaluable, and his courage had grown with each successful rescue. "On our way," replied, heading for the bridge with beside him. The bridge of the Redemption buzzed with quiet efficiency. At the helm sat the young they'd met on Nexus Prime. Her guardians had been reluctant to let her join their crew, but her determination and natural piloting skills had eventually won them over. At the communications station, Doctor monitored medical channels and refugee networks, using his contacts to coordinate relief efforts. "Signals coming from a modified freighter," reported. "Dead in space, minimal life support." "Survivors?" asked, moving to the tactical station. "3 life signs, but they're fatting fast," came the reply from their sensor operator, a former hegemony naval officer named Commander who joined them after witnessing their work firsthand. "Take us in," ordered. As they approached the distressed vessel, tactical displays lit up with warnings. "Weapons signatures detected. This could be a trap." "Or it could be exactly what it appears to be," countered. "We've saved 17 legitimate distress calls this month." "And walked into 4 ambushes," reminded him. "Which we handled," replied with a grin. "Besides, that's why I have the galaxy's most dangerous woman watching my back." "Former galaxy's most dangerous woman," corrected with what had become their running joke. "I am reformed." The rescue proceeded smoothly. The freighter had been attacked by raiders, but had managed to drive them off at the cost of their engines and life support. The crew was grateful beyond words to see the Redemption, and particularly amazed to find Vex personally helping with their medical care. "I heard stories," one of the survivors whispered to Doctor. "They said the Death of Worlds had become a protector of merchants and refugees. I thought they were just stories." "The stories are true," Doctor replied gently. "She has found a new purpose." As they escorted the damaged freighter to safety, found in her quarters, reviewing tactical reports. The space had been decorated with small personal items, gifts from people they'd helped, artwork from refugee children, and a photo of the Redemption's crew taken after their first successful mission. "Finding anything useful?" asked. "Perhaps," replied. The attack patterns suggest the raiders have inside information. Someone is providing them with convoy schedules and cargo manifests. Any idea who? His expression hardened slightly. I may have some contacts who could help us find out. My former associates might have information. Sat down across from her. You don't have to go back to that world. We can find other ways to investigate. But this way would be faster, pointed out. And every day we delay, more convoys are attacked. And every day you delay going back to your old contacts, you get stronger in your new identity, countered. There's no rush to face those demons. Considered this for a moment. You worry that I will revert to my former self. I worry that you'll think you have to, admitted. You've built something amazing here, a crew that respects and trusts you, a mission that saves lives instead of taking them, a reputation based on protection rather than fear. Don't risk that unless you absolutely have to. Before could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. They rushed to the bridge to find their crew in full alert status. Report ordered. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet heading for the Epsilon colony, Commander announced. Preliminary identification suggests raiders, but the numbers are unprecedented, at least 30 ships. Felt his stomach drop. Epsilon colony was home to 50,000 refugees from the recent war in the Vega system. They had minimal defenses and no way to evacuate in time. How long until the fleet reaches the colony? Asked. 14 hours, replied. And how long for us to get there? 16 hours minimum. Looked around the bridge at faces filled with determination and fear in equal measure. The redemption was powerful for its size, but 30 raider ships represented overwhelming odds. Options asked. We could contact the Galactic Defense Force, Doctor suggested. Their nearest fleet is 3 days away, Commander noted. We could warn the colony to evacuate, offered. 50,000 people with only 14 hours' notice, pointed out over the intercom. Impossible. Found himself looking at, knowing what she was thinking. There was one option they hadn't discussed. I could contact my former associates, said quietly. Some of them owe me favors if I called in those debts. You'd have to become the old you again, finished. The death of worlds instead of Vex, protector and friend. Perhaps, admitted, but 50,000 lives hang in the balance. The bridge fell silent as everyone contemplated the choice before them. Understood the sacrifice was willing to make. She would risk everything she'd built to save people she'd never met. There's another way, said suddenly an idea forming. What if we don't fight the raiders at all? Explain, said. Move to the navigation console, plotting courses and calculating possibilities. They aren't mindless killers. They attack convoys and colonies because it's profitable. What if we made it unprofitable? How, Commander asked. By giving them a better offer, replied, his plan taking shape. Your reputation still carries weight in criminal circles, right? Unfortunately, yes. Then we use that. We approach the raider fleet under a flag of truce and offer them a deal they can't refuse. What kind of deal? Doctor asked nervously. Grinned, the expression carrying echoes of the confidence that had helped them survive their first encounter. The kind only humans are crazy enough to propose. 3 hours later, the Redemption dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the raider fleet. Had to admire their discipline. Despite facing overwhelming odds, his crew remained calm and focused. The lead raider ship immediately demanded their surrender, but had expected that. This is Captain of the Redemption, he broadcast on all frequencies. I request parley under the Galactic Commerce Accords with Warlord. You are either very brave or very stupid, human, came the reply in heavily accented Standard Galactic. I prefer to think of it as optimistic, replied. I have a business proposition that will make you more profit than raiding Epsilon Colony ever could. An hour of negotiations followed, conducted over secured channels while the two fleets maintained their positions. Offered the raiders detailed information about 3 major corporate convoys carrying luxury goods worth 10 times the value of anything they could loot from a refugee colony. The catch was that the information came with conditions. They would have to swear off attacking humanitarian missions entirely, and they would have to allow the Redemption to escort refugee convoys through their territory in exchange for ongoing intelligence about corporate shipping. You ask us to change our entire way of life, Warlord observed during the final negotiations. I'm asking you to be smarter about how you make a living, corrected. Corporate ships carry valuable cargo and can afford the losses. Refugee ships carry people who have already lost everything. Where's the honor in attacking those who can't fight back? Honor does not fill cargo holds, pointed out. No, but reputation does, interjected, speaking for the first time during the negotiations. I was once like you, taking whatever contracts paid the most, regardless of the target. But I learned that some kinds of wealth come at too high a price. The death of worlds speaks of conscience, asked, his tone carrying a mixture of surprise and amusement. The death of worlds speaks of wisdom, replied. I found something worth more than profit, perhaps you can as well. The negotiations concluded with a formal treaty, the first of its kind between a pirate fleet and a humanitarian organization. They would redirect their efforts to corporate targets, and the redemption would provide intelligence and safe passage in exchange for protection of refugee convoys. As the raider fleet turned away from Epsilon Colony, found himself surrounded by his crew, all of them slightly stunned by what they'd just accomplished. That was either brilliant or insane, Commander observed. With humans, those are often the same thing, Doctor noted with a chuckle. Later that evening, as the Redemption headed toward their next mission, and stood once again on the observation deck watching the stars. No regrets, asked. About giving up my old reputation, considered the question. No, I prefer who I am now. And who are you now? Smiled, the expression now natural and unguarded. I am Vex, partner to, protector of those who cannot protect themselves, and proof that anyone can choose to be better than they were. That's a pretty good legacy, observed. We are not finished building it yet, replied. The galaxy is vast and there are many who still need help. Nodded, looking out at the infinite expanse of space ahead of them. Their story had begun with a simple act of human compassion, one person helping another in need. Now it had grown into something much larger, a movement, a fleet, a new way of thinking about justice and redemption. The galaxy's deadliest woman had become its greatest protector, not through force of arms, but through the transformative power of friendship and hope. And somewhere in the void between stars, 50,000 refugees slept safely because a human had chosen kindness over fear, and a warrior had chosen growth over stagnation. It was, reflected, a very human story, and like all the best human stories, it was just the beginning. Ray both about to discover something new about what it meant to be alive in a galaxy full of infinite possibilities. Was enough,